Recently, the National Association of Realtors has published their annual highlights of the characteristics of the home buyers and sellers. And there's some very interesting facts that has changed since 1981 when they first started tracking this data. So let's check it out. Thanks for watching this video. Today, we're talking about who are these buyers and sellers, especially over the last year, and how do they compare and how have they changed since really the National Association of Realtors has been tracking this data since 1981. Melissa, this is going to be interesting because the data that we're looking at, though it's not, yesterday, it really covers a very critical time of, home buyers and sellers since the boom that we really saw, which really is from July of 21 to the end of June of 22. And we know that we've seen here locally the peak, we'll consider the peak somewhere around April or May of this year. So this data, very relevant. I'm excited to dive in.
Todd, you're right. I mean, this has been a very interesting time reviewing the past 2 years, actually. So taking this data from that period of time, from July 21 to June 22, there are significant differences that we're seeing in comparison with just the year prior.
All right, so let's talk about the data on first-time home buyers. This has been a large pool of buyers historically through the years. And since 1981, we have never seen the number as low as it has been. So first-time buyers dropped to 26% in this period.
In this time period, the typical first-time home buyer was 36 years old. And just the year prior, the typical age of the first-time home buyer was 33 years old.
That really comes as not much of a surprise because a first-time buyer being a younger person, right? So what we know is because of the lack of affordability, the age has gone up. So they can't buy as early in life. And then also there's less of them that can afford to buy at all.
I think there's a lot going on for this younger generation. Their rents are rising. I think they're honestly scared. I think they're taking time. And I think that they don't want to jump into something that's going to be crazy unaffordable for them.
Not all of them have parents that can give them gift money. So when you're looking at, down payment money, being, I think the national average was about 6% that first-time buyers put down on, actually maybe higher than that, maybe 10% on their home. A lot of that was gift money, which we'll talk about. The data also shows us that a large percentage of these buyers bought existing homes, not new homes. So there was a lot of consideration to repairs. And I think you're right. I think the first-time buyer was a little timid in jumping into this heated market because they had to give away their, rights for inspections and things like that, lose all their contingencies just to compete.
Also, something interesting in this report is that the typical age of the repeat buyer climbed to 59 years of age on average.
And I think the result of that, too, is that a lot of people have stayed in their homes longer than they had in several years prior. I think it was somewhere around 7 to 9 years, the typical buyer before, stayed in a home before they moved. So that we know has gone up as well. So again, not a big surprise. And also, these buyers, these repeat buyers, where are they going? And, that's a big consideration too, when we know that, they had to go out and try and compete for something.
Let's go over some overall statistics. 14% of home buyers purchase a multi-generational home. There's many reasons for this: taking care of aging parents, younger children, having to move back into the home because of affordability, and overall cost savings.
One of the things that we learned, I think, through the pandemic and having a lot of conversations with the children, the adult children of aging parents, and really the aging parents themselves, was that they were completely scared to death being in an environment with COVID where their family members were completely isolated from them. In other words, they closed down these nursing centers and assisted living facilities. Understandably, the pandemic, they didn't want anybody else coming in. So a lot of these aging parents really got scared. They died off and really went through a lot of emotional strain. And I think that as, the adult aging parents of these elderly folks, they said, you know what? There's no way I'm going to let that happen to me. I don't want to be in an environment where I'm going to be in a retirement community where my family may not be able to come in. And then that coupled with the fact that, there's a lot of documentation that says that we do heal better at home. We do live healthier at home. So I think, by a lot of families now considering this when they're buying a home, hey, let's keep mom and dad next to us in a, in-law suite or something to that nature makes a whole lot of sense.
And as I mentioned before, a lot of these young adults are moving home. They need to save money. And it's now commonplace for you to have many different generations living in the home, especially that younger generation. They may even stay there until the next life event, which potentially could be marriage. Also reported 88% of new home buyers were buying a previously owned home. I know we talk a lot about new home construction, but 88% is a substantial amount purchasing a previously owned home.
I think a lot of this had to do with, the homes being ready, right? People wanted to buy and move in, get set up. And, with the new home construction, they had supply chain issues. I know a lot of the sales centers were only allowed to sell 4 houses, 5 houses a month in that subdivision. So, it caused people to, though they may want a new home, caused them to really look at the existing homes to make their buying decisions.
With that and the pressures of them having to put an offer in and foregoing the inspections leads to a lot of buyer's remorse.
Yeah, I mean, you're buying an older home, so there are things in the house that haven't been fixed. Probably have been broken for years, right? Systems that when you're getting a new house, systems that are old. We have a situation right now where a client just bought a new home, and here they are a month later, and the HVAC system needs to be replaced. Just the units themselves, small place, and it's almost $12,000. So, a lot of what we're seeing from the home sales in the last couple of years is a lot of buyer remorse. Recent polls have shown that in the last 2 years, up to 74% of the home buyers have had some type of remorse. And one of the things that tops the list is the fact that when they waived their inspection, they actually got into the house and realized there was a lot wrong, a lot that needed to be fixed, a lot that needed to be updated. And guys, for a lot of these buyers, they don't have the money.
Of these people that purchased new construction, 41% of them did so because they wanted to avoid problems and repairs.
And also, they cited that another reason why they went new construction was they didn't want to get into the bidding wars, right? I mean, it was simple. You sat down with the new home sales rep, picked your colors, your, palette, things like that, your kitchen furnishings, and it was done, right? They paid a lot of money for it, but they didn't have to negotiate. All right, so let's kind of talk about, next up is the travel distance, like where people used to live and where they bought a home. And I thought that this was interesting. That significantly increased in just a year's time, where it used to be, they moved from one house to another. It was 15 miles on average. Now it's 50 miles on average. And I think a lot of this, Melissa, is because, people believed that they would be remote forever. And then also, I think it's affordability issues, where they were living before, maybe they were renting and, they can't afford to buy in that, maybe more urban area. So they move to more rural locations. I think this is going to cause a lot of problems for buyers. I mean, imagine 50 miles. If you were living in one place, working in an area and living there, and then you're expecting to reroute your whole entire life 50 miles away from that point, that's going to cause a lot of problems, I think, with buyers.
So, you think about that 50 miles out, that's substantial. You're away from your friends, your family, your normal hot spots that you like to go to, and then now you're stuck. And then seeing the way the market is right now, who knows if you're even going to be able to have the option to potentially move again.
And that is one of the concerns that I've had with everybody kind of like buying at the peak, right? We saw a lot of FOMO. These younger people were they wanted to dive in, they wanted to buy a house, and now they didn't realize, hey, look, 50 miles not that far away, right? It's a big deal. Could be another hour and a half sitting in traffic. And if they decide to sell now or in the next couple of years, they may actually get less for the house than what they paid for it. Melissa, the interesting thing is too, there was a, part of this study, they said to these buyers, how long do you expect to live in the home that you purchased? And for a lot of them, they said the average was, well, I'll at least be here for 15 years. And like 28% of the respondents said that they would never move. And I don't know about you, but I mean, could you make a purchasing decision at this phase of your life with the anticipation that you'd never move?
Definitely not. I mean, the whole thing is here, these people were so desperate to get into a house that they're willing to just manipulate. I think sometimes we get like that. We so badly want something that we're like, sure, we're going to be there for 15 years. And then when it comes down to it, you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just say yes to? And that's what's going on. So yeah.
And it almost, sounds like a conversation that somebody would maybe say like, hey, why are you buying now? Why don't you wait until the market cools off? Nah, I want to buy now. I'm going to be there forever. I'm not going to move. I'm whatever. So it sounds like one of those things that you would say when you're trying to justify why you just want to do it.
86% of these buyers purchased through either using a real estate agent or broker. What do you think about that?
I think it's probably one of the lowest in the histories that we've seen, right? And it doesn't surprise me that they bypass the agent on some of these home sales. And a lot of them, like 10% of the home buyers bought directly from the seller where there was no agent involved. And of that, 50% of the buyers and sellers knew each other. So I think it was a lot of those things where, the neighbor told another neighbor, hey, we're going to sell our house. And then that neighbor said, whoa, I've got somebody that wants to buy it. They want to be in the neighborhood. I've had that happen a couple times. I know myself personally where people interviewed us to, take on their listing, but all of a sudden they did it offline. A neighbor's friend or family member bought the house.
Let's go over some of the financing on how they exactly paid for these houses. 78% of these home buyers financed their home, which is actually down from 87% in the 2021 report.
So it'd be interesting to know, what the breakdown is of the new buyers, first-time buyers versus repeat buyers. I think repeat buyers really kind of skewed this number a lot because they were selling and they had so much equity in their home that even if they had a mortgage, it was nothing to pay it off. And then they used that cash to just outright buy the home. And, a lot of situations too, they had to. They were competing. So many buyers were competing with cash offers. We've talked about this a lot before, where investors, were Wall Street type businesses, were just writing checks. So I think for many buyers, if they wanted to stand a chance to get the offer accepted, they had to pay cash.
And 22% of these first-time buyers needed a gift or a loan from family or friends.
Right, 22% of the first-time buyers. So the declining pool of buyers, first-time buyers, right? We talked about that earlier. 22% of them needed help. So I think this is a trend that we are going to see less of. I don't know that mom and dad in the current state of the economy, or at least the uncertainty of the economy, are going to be so quick to, write checks for $50,000, $70,000 to their kids for down payment money. Could be wrong, but I think that statistic is going to decline. So Melissa, we talked about these buyers. Let's talk about the sellers because, one of the big things that I think, is always interesting is why is somebody moving in the first place? Now we're seeing it where they're not, right? And really there hasn't been historically over the last couple of years, we've been so low on available inventory. I think it's been kind of like the perfect storm. Finance has been cheap. A lot of the people, that bought 10 years ago that had those 7-8% loans, even 6% loans, they refinanced at the lowest possible amounts. So, they were looking at, wow, my house has tons of equity, but I'm paying less for it every single month. Where am I going to go and get, better than what I have right now, even though interest rates were low at the time? Why am I going to go out and spend 2 times as much for a house and have a lot less? So that has made inventory, very tight. But let's talk about that. So some of the motivations, the most commonly cited reason for selling your home was a desire to move closer to family and friends. So the exact opposite of what we found with buyers, right? In this latest trend was they were moving further away from family and friends to get that house. So these sellers were saying, I want to get back to family and friends and, have more of a community and not commute as much.
So what's happening is these sellers typically lived in their homes for 10 years before listing their home for sale, whereas in the report the year prior, it was 8 years.
And, when we go back into the 70s and 80s, people were staying in their home for 20 and 30 years. So this is still a decline in the amount of time that people spent. I mean, I remember growing up, people didn't move, right? A lot of my friends' parents from high school still live in the same house that they did 30 years ago, right? 40 years ago. So we're still seeing these trends where, people are hopping around. They're selling, 10 years, not that long to be in a house. But really, you're right. The trend is certainly, longer. 10 years has been longer than the typical 8 or 9 years that we've seen over the last probably decade.
And more information about the sellers, 41% of the sellers traded up to a larger home, with 32% stayed in the same size home.
And I think this just gets back to the number one motivation was getting back closer to family and friends. And I think that, we're realizing over the last couple of years that community is really important.
So there you have it, guys. Lots of information there on the buyers and sellers side. We will drop the link below for additional information. We did not go into every single detail that's in the report, but we welcome you to check it out.
If you liked the video, guys, you can let Melissa and I know that you did by hitting that thumbs up. And as always, we love it when you subscribe to our channel. Share us with your friends.
Keep those comments and questions coming. We love reading them.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.